For my English Comedy presentation, I chose Charlotte Perkins Gilman's short story, The Yellow Wallpaper. This story follows an unnamed woman who is placed in a room by her husband, John, who is also a doctor. He believes that rest and isolation will cure her nervous condition, but instead of healing her, the treatment causes her mental state to collapse. I chose the story because it connects strongly to the course through themes of trauma, confinement, identity, gender roles, power, and the struggle to be heard. Like the wars, it shows that suffering is not always obvious from the outside. Sometimes the most damaging battles happen inside a person's mind. In the story, the narrator is brought to a large house for the summer. Her husband decides that she should stay in an upstairs room and avoid working, writing, and mental effort. At first, the narrator seems uncomfortable but obedient. She does not fully agree with John, but she also does not have the power to challenge him directly. Over time, she becomes obsessed with the yellow wallpaper in her room. She studies its pattern and eventually believes there is a woman trapped behind it. By the end of the story, she tears the wallpaper down, believing she has freed the woman. The ending is disturbing because it suggests that the trapped woman is really a reflection of the narrator herself. One of the strongest ways to analyze this story is through a feminist lens. A feminist lens looks at how gender roles, power, and social expectations affect characters. In The Yellow Wallpaper, the narrator is controlled by male authority. John is not only her husband, but also her doctor, which gives him power in both the home and the medical world. He decides what is wrong with her, what she is allowed to do, where she sleeps, and how she should behave. At one point, the narrator says, "John laughs at me, of course, but one expects that in marriage." This line is important because she treats his disrespect as normal. The phrase, "of course," shows that she has been taught to expect dismissal instead of understanding it. She is not shocked that John laughs at her. Instead, she accepts it as part of marriage. Through a feminist lens, the story becomes more than just one woman's breakdown. It becomes a criticism of a society where women's voices are ignored. This connects to the wars because both texts show individuals being damaged by systems of power. In the wars, Robert Ross is trapped by war, duty, military authority, masculinity, and family expectations. In The Yellow Wallpaper, the narrator is trapped by marriage, medicine, gender roles, domestic space. The settings are very different, but the deeper idea is similar. Both characters are placed inside systems that claim to protect order, but actually destroy the individual. Robert is harmed by the system of war, while Gilman's narrator is harmed by the system of patriarchal control. Both characters are sensitive people in worlds that do not allow sensitivity. Robert cannot fully survive in a military world that demands obedience and emotional hardness. The narrator cannot survive in a domestic world that demands silence and submission. Both texts show that when society forces people into roles that deny their true selves, the result can be destruction. A second useful lens is the psychoanalytic lens. This lens focuses on the mind, repression, fear, and hidden desires. In the story, the narrator cannot openly express herself. She's not allowed to write freely. She cannot make her own medical decisions, and she cannot tell John the full truth about how she feels. Because of this, her thoughts become focused on the wallpaper. The wallpaper becomes a projection of her trapped identity. When she imagines a woman behind the wallpaper, she is really seeing herself. The woman trapped behind the pattern represents the narrator's desire to escape. Since she cannot directly say, "I feel trapped," her mind creates an image of another woman who is trapped. This makes the wallpaper both a real object in the room and a symbol of her subconscious mind. This is what makes the story psychologically powerful. The narrator's breakdown does not come out of nowhere. it builds slowly because her emotions are repressed. She is told to be calm, quiet, and obedient, but those emotions do not disappear. They come back through the wallpaper. The more she is silenced in real life, the more intense the wallpaper becomes in her mind. The most important literary device in the story is symbolism. The yellow wallpaper begins as something ugly and annoying, but it slowly becomes a symbol of imprisonment, mental breakdown, and social control. The narrator spends more and more time staring at it, and the pattern starts to feel like a cage. This is effective because the wallpaper is part of a domestic space, not a battlefield or prison. Gilman shows that a home can become a place of confinement when the person inside it has no freedom. The wallpaper also symbolizes the narrator's identity. At first, she sees the pattern as confusing, unpleasant. Later, she sees a woman trapped behind it. By the end, she tears the wallpaper down, as if she is tearing down the barrier between herself and freedom. However, the ending is not purely victorious. It is disturbing because her escape seems to come through madness. She gains a form of freedom, but only after her mind has been pushed to the breaking point. This connects strongly to the wars. In Finley's novel, war turns ordinary human beings into damaged survivors. The battlefield becomes a place where identity breaks down. In Gilman's story, the bedroom becomes its own kind of battlefield. The narrator is not fighting soldiers, but she is fighting control, silence, and the loss of her own mind. Both texts show that trauma can come from environments where people are denied control over their lives. Another important device is unreliable narration. The story is told through the narrator's private journal entries, but as the story continues, her mental state becomes less stable. This makes her an unreliable narrator. However, this does not mean she is lying. In fact, her unreliability makes the story more powerful because the readers experience her breakdown from inside her mind. We understand her fear, her frustration, and loneliness more clearly than John does. This creates irony because John has the official authority, but the narrator's journal gives the reader the deeper truth. John is the doctor. John is the husband. John is the person society would trust. But the reader can see that John does not truly understand her. The narrator may seem unstable, but her suffering is real. This connects to the way the wars also challenges simple truth. Robert's story is not told in a straightforward way. It is reconstructed through memory, documents, photographs, and different perspectives. This makes the reader think about how truth is built in both texts. Truth is not always found through official authority. Sometimes truth comes through fragmented voices, personal memories, and emotional experience. The story also explores the theme of silence and voice. The narrator is told not to write, even though writing is one of the only ways she can express herself. Because she cannot speak honestly in her daily life, her secret journal becomes an act of resistance. Writing allows her to preserve her thoughts in a world that keeps trying to erase them. This connects to the purpose of literature in the English course. Many texts give voice to people who are ignored, misunderstood, or pushed aside. In the wars, Robert's story is reconstructed after his death, which shows how storytelling can recover voices that history tries to bury. In the yellow wallpaper, the narrator's writing becomes proof that her suffering was real, even if the people around her refuse to understand it. Another major theme is isolation. John believes that isolation will heal the narrator, but it actually makes her worse. This is one of the most important messages of the story. The narrator does not need to be cut off from life. She needs freedom, expression, and connection. Instead, she is placed in a room and treated like a child. Her isolation makes her thoughts turn inward until the wallpaper becomes her entire world. This connects to Robert Ross because Robert also experiences emotional isolation. Even when he is surrounded by other soldiers, he is often alone in his values and sensitivity. War expects him to be strong, obedient, and masculine, but Robert is deeply affected by suffering, especially the suffering of innocent people and animals. But Robert and Gilman's narrators showed that isolation is not always about being physically alone. Sometimes isolation means being surrounded by people who do not understand you. One of the most interesting themes in the yellow wallpaper is control disguised as care. John constantly acts as if everything he does is for the narrator's benefit. He tells her to rest, control her schedule, and dismiss her concerns because he thinks he knows best. However, the story shows that care becomes harmful when it removes someone's freedom. This connects to the wars because it is often presented through positive language such as duty, honor, and sacrifice. However, Finley shows the destruction behind those words. In both texts, authority uses respectable language to hide harm. John calls this controlled treatment, which society calls war honor. Both texts question whether authority should be trusted when it silences individual suffering. The story also uses setting very effectively. The narrator is placed in a nursery, which is important because it makes her seem childlike, even though she is an adult woman. The room symbolically reduces her to a child. John also speaks to her in a patronizing way, which reinforces this power imbalance. The nursery becomes a physical symbol of how society infantilizes her. She is treated as someone who cannot think for herself, even though the reader can clearly see that she has deep thoughts and strong awareness. This use of setting connects to the wars because physical spaces in literature often reflect emotional states in the wars. The battlefield reflects chaos, destruction, and moral collapse. In the yellow wallpaper, the bedroom reflects psychological imprisonment. Both settings are not just backgrounds, they shape the characters and reveal the central themes of the text. Another important idea is identity loss. At the beginning of the story, the narrator still has some sense of herself. She wants to write, she has opinions, she disagrees with John privately, but as the story continues, her sense of self becomes weaker. She becomes more connected to the woman in the wallpaper than to her real identity. By the end, she seems to merge with that trapped woman she imagined. This is tragic because the narrator is not only losing her sanity, she is losing the ability to exist as herself. Her identity is broken down by constant dismissal. This connects to Robert Ross, who has also experienced a crisis of identity. Robert begins as a young man with compassion and moral sensitivity, but war places him in the situations that destroy his innocence. Both texts show that identity is fragile when people are placed under extreme pressure. Personally, I found the yellow wallpaper powerful because it shows how dangerous it is when someone's pain is dismissed. The narrator does not break down for no reason. Her breakdown happens because nobody listens to her. What makes the story disturbing is that John believes he is truly helping, but his confidence prevents him from seeing the damage he is causing. This made me think about how important it is to take people seriously when they say they are struggling, even when the pain is not visible. The story shows that ignoring someone's voice can be a form of harm. It also shows that people need more than physical safety. They need dignity, independence, and the ability to express themselves. Overall, the yellow wallpaper connects strongly to the English course because it uses literary devices and literary lenses to explore major themes like trauma, power, confinement, identity, and voice. Through symbolism, unreliable narration, feminist criticism, and psychoanalytical analysis, the story shows how a person can be destroyed when they are denied freedom and expression. When connected to the wars, the story reveals that violence does not only happen through weapons or battle. Violence can also happen through silence, control, and the refusal to listen. Both texts show individuals trapped inside systems that claim to protect order, but end up destroying human dignity. In the end, the yellow wallpaper is not just a story about madness. It is a story about what happens when a person's voice is taken away for too long.